Welcome to another episode of Forensic Video Law, where the facts are not just talked about, they are visually shown through hard-hitting, demonstrative video evidence.
In catastrophic injury litigation, the valuation of damages often turns on whether jurors merely hear the facts or truly see the impact. Attorney Jamie Holland used a powerful day-in-the-life video of his quadriplegic client and coordinated expert video depositions to transform a $75 million demand from a headline number into a justified measure of lifelong loss, and why the defense chose to settle while the jury was deliberating.
Joining me today is a good friend of mine, Mr. Jamie Holland. Jamie, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Jamie, you just got through with a trial where you represented a man who had become a quadriplegic due to someone else's negligence. For our viewers, can you frame the case? Because you used the dash cam video footage in this case, you used expert video deposition footage, and you used day-in-the-life footage that we helped you streamline for the case. So again, please give the viewers a little nutshell of the case.
I'll give you a quick nutshell of the case. It was two semi-trucks. It was on I-95 North, and we represented the truck behind, the one that ran into the back of the other truck. And when you hear those facts, you're like, oh, the guy that runs into the back of the truck in front, it's got to be his fault. This was a case where that was not the case. The truck in front parked on the shoulder of I-95. Not legal.
Right.
Pulls out going very slow speed in the early morning hours. Our guy coming up from behind, drivers don't have the ability to recognize things they don't expect.
Right.
And a truck going that slow in front was not expected, and it plows right into the back of the other truck.
Wow.
Client became an instant quadriplegic. His truck, as seen on the dash cam, actually is seen smoking going down the road from the front truck's dash cam off into the woods because, client's knocked out and got a broken neck.
Right.
He can't control the truck.
Right.
He's along for the ride. And so that's the case. And that's the case that took 4 weeks to try in Miami.
So when did you decide that this was going to be a high-level case, a high damages case?
Well, anytime you've got severe traumatic brain injury or a quadriplegic, it's always going to be a high damages case. The amount of medical care that it's going to take care of either of those two is significant, going to be in the millions, if not tens of millions. So that's kind of the threshold as soon as you hear about one of those cases.
So what were some of the primary legal theories that were advanced in the case?
Well, by us, it was don't park on the shoulder of a road and expect to come out safely onto an interstate.
Right.
Go down the street to the truck stop and park safely. That was our primary theory. The defense's primary theory is they got to park somewhere to comply with hours of service law. Everywhere else was dangerous, so they picked the safest spot. That was their theory. And the rest area behind them, they'd just gone through and it was full. So they did the best of what they had, was essentially the defense's theory.
So when did you decide to produce a day in the life for this video for this trial?
I made that decision about 7 days after getting called to come try the case with a good friend and co-counsel. And my first question is, what do we have to show what our client goes through on a daily basis? And the answer was, well, we really don't have anything. We've got a good doctor up in Atlanta who can talk about it. And my response was, well, that's great. It's great. We've got a great doctor.
Right.
But we need to be able to show the jury what this client goes through, because it's difficult, even with the best doctor in the world describing it, for a jury to visualize that. They need to see it.
And so what did you do to ensure the authenticity of the video?
Well, I'll tell you what, to ensure the authenticity of the video, I hired somebody that I knew that had a lot of experience, that was really good at bringing out the emotional essence of a case like this. And it was you. It's you can't just hire somebody with a video camera and tell them, hey, go film this. It doesn't work that way. No more than you'd hire somebody with a who's never been on a newscasting scene to say, hey, go capture some film for the news tonight. It doesn't work that way. You have to get somebody that knows what they're doing, because in these types of cases, you can either push too far and over dramatize it and lose the jury, not push far enough, under dramatize it, miss the emotional essence, and have it just be a cold slate, and you lose the jury that way. It's a very, very narrow margin that is right, and you've got the ability to hit that margin.
Well, thank you very much. And so, I mean, also, what role did the video play with your medical experts?
We had one of the best physiatrists that I've ever seen. A wonderfully caring doctor who was emotionally invested in her patients. And I'll give you an example. Our client's bed breaks down at his mother's house. It stops working. She goes out of her house, goes to the client's house, finds another bed from a patient that is recently deceased, and gets that bed transferred so that her patient has what he needs, and does all that. This is not something she's getting an invoice or sending out a medical bill for. This is something she's doing because her heart's in her patients.
Well, I mean, also, were there any admissibility challenges?
No, because here's how we framed it. We got the doctor on the stand describing medically everything that that this quadriplegic was going through. Then it was an easy transfer from there to say, okay, we've heard the details. Now, can you show us? And that's in essence where we use the day in the life and the videos to demonstrate not only what I told the jury in opening statement, not only what the doctor told them in terms of the medical details, but to demonstrate what it looks like in real life, in real time, when a patient has got to try to turn themselves over in bed, when the patient's got to have their mother put a suppository in when they're 62 years old. And those are the hard facts. That had to be shown. You can't just describe them.
It was a very intense day in the life video when we produced it, and he is such a nice guy, and in trying to get through this. I mean, during trial, what were some of the juries? Did you observe any of their reactions?
I did, and it was an emotional commitment, and that's when you ask people to take 4 weeks out of their lives, come into a jury room and give up whatever's going on and commit to a case, you better have something worth that commitment. And once they began to understand what this particular quadriplegic was going through, once they began to understand the magnitude, we did not get any of the typical "why am I here" looks from jurors. We got, "I know why I'm here. I'm here to do the right thing, and I'm committed to it."
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then now you used video depositions in some parts of the case. Why did you use the video instead of as opposed to having them live on trial?
Sometimes with some witnesses, no matter how you might try, it's difficult to get the life out of the witness. And they play better on camera than they do in real life. So we made some tactical decisions. These videos are as good as it's going to get for this particular witness. So, and the key to a video is you're always going to get the last minute objections. You're always going to get, "Hey, judge, we want this out." And it's always the night before you're going to do the video, sometimes the hour before you do the video. And you've got to have, candidly, an editor on call ready to make the changes. If not, you never get the video in.
I remember that. Yes, the late night calls, the last minute. You got these redactions, and
oh, by the way, this isn't quite correct, and this needs to come out. And it's a difficult process because there are a lot of moving pieces to it, and if you don't plan it and set it up ahead of time, I mean, with you've got the transcripts ahead of time, you've got the full footage ahead of time, you have all that, and you have some idea of what's likely to come out and what's not. So it makes it easier, but still, I'm calling you at 11 o'clock at night, or my assistant's calling you at 11 o'clock at night and say, "Hey, the judge just made this ruling. This needs to come out too." So or the defense just changed their mind. This needs to come in.
Right.
and it's just a
Back and
evolving
forth.
picture.
Right, right. It was extremely intense. And so how did the defense attempt to counteract the visuals that you had?
Not very well. Which, listen, I always appreciate the fact that the defense likes to talk details. They love their little details. They either
Right.
distract and overwhelm the jury with confusion or try to dissect your case and just cut it until it falls apart. But, and the defense in this case was no different. They tried to just confuse, overwhelm, death of 1,000 cuts. It doesn't work as well if the jury is fully invested and sees the case,
Right.
because all those cuts don't really take the image down. It works a lot better if you just have a drier case, and the defense then has some traction with those issues. They didn't here.
And, I mean, again, you use so many different elements in this case, and you also use some dash cam video footage. How did you use that, and how did that work out? I remember we edited quite a few pieces for that.
Well, we had some dash cam footage, but it had no context. In other words,
Right.
there were some very important points we wanted the jury to focus on, so we had to give it context. So we not only set it up as a dash cam, we set clips up in a PowerPoint so that we could freeze it in a certain point and focus on the context, and then hit and play it and freeze it at the next important point on context. And we did that through several witnesses, so it allowed us to kind of bring the focus in on what was important and put the jury's focus on that. So that's what that's what we polled the jury afterwards, that they did tend to focus on the focus points we directed them to.
Well, how did you justify and calculate the $75 million amount that you wanted for this case?
Well, a $75 million ask is a big ask of any jury, particularly just for one human being.
Right.
In Florida, pain and suffering breaks down into multiple elements, all of which were in play in this case. You've got inconvenience, disfigurement, loss of enjoyment of life, mental anguish, pain and suffering, which is physical. You've got all of these elements. And you have a gentleman who's a 24/7 sufferer of every one of those elements. And if you had to do a scale and say, okay, is it in doctor's terms, is it mild? Is it moderate? Is it severe? In fact, I asked the doctor herself, I said, take us through these categories. How would you rate this as a doctor who's taking a cold clinical approach to this case?
Right.
How would you rate the severity of each one? Mild, moderate, severe? Every single category, severe. How many hours a day is this patient going to suffer from these? Well, except for a few categories where he's sleeping, it's a 24-hour thing.
Right.
And we took that testimony and put it in a chart at the end. And essentially, I walked the jury through and said, if this were a job and we were to post it on just a single element, and we were to take what Mr. Benton was making, $30 an hour, nobody in the world would take this job for just a single element. And for some, we asked for 30 an hour. For some, we asked for 60 an hour. And when you take it through all of those elements for the time he's going to suffer for the rest of his life, it ends up with very big numbers. And that's really what the crux of our pain and suffering argument was, which was the biggest part of our case. And just to give you an idea of how little the defense liked that approach, they did a motion in limine to try to prevent me from arguing pain and suffering that way. There was no case law to support it, and they didn't even bring it up. I think it was something they put in the record to try to make it an appellate motion in the future. But it was effective, and I believe some of the jurors, had it gone on to verdict, some of the jurors would have argued for some of those much larger numbers.
Right.
There's no guarantee because we don't know what they would have done, but we had the majority on our side.
And after the settlement, you were able to talk to some of the jurors. What did they tell you? Well,
it really broke down into about we had 6 jurors that went back to deliberate. Broke down into about a 4-2 split. 2 were leaning more towards some of the defense arguments, and 4 were leaning our way. two very strongly and two in the middle. But we had the leaders on the jury. We had the foreperson and the next biggest leader. So had that played out, you can't guarantee anything.
Right.
But it would have likely have gone strongly in our favor because the leaders tend to do what they do.
Correct.
They lead everybody,
Right.
and the followers tend to do what they do. They follow along and agree and commit. And we were headed in the right direction.
So do you believe that these catastrophic injury cases, do they require high-level video production to remain competitive? Or is video a game changer?
Well, to get the real result that is required, you've got to have high level on everything. You've got to have high level on the medicine. You've got to have high level on the damage. You've got to have a high level on the lawyering. And you've got to have high level on every piece of evidence you put in front of a jury. Because if anything is not high level, then it tends to degrade your entire case. If you have a super high damages case, which this was, you better take a super significant approach to it and be willing to spend whatever it takes to prove it up. And that's what we did in this case. And I had a great co-counsel. Before I came on, he'd invested a lot in this case, both his heart, his soul, and his pocketbook. And it was a wonderful case to join the team.
And so what ethical boundaries did you have to consider when you were having the video produced?
The ethical boundaries to consider were really just make it true, make it accurate. I mean, that's and do what is right and committed to the client. And that's, if you do what's right and committed to the client, pretty much all the other ethical rules fall in place.
And you've spoken to your client recently. Sort of tell us, I mean, how is this this wonderful settlement that you were able to get for him changed his life?
Well, I can't talk about the settlement because it is in itself is in
Well, I
confidence.
just meant, yes.
But here's what I can tell you. A case like this done right has the ability, and I'll give you an example. When we went down to Miami, we had to get an entire medical ambulance to transport the client from Atlanta to Gab, where he lives, to Miami. He lives in his mother's house. That's the only option he has at
Right.
62 years old, and his mother's in her 80s. And we get him down. We had to arrange for a handicapped accessible apartment, and we found one, and it was in the same complex that the rest of us were staying in, and we had his mother and his aunt and our client. And one of the most remarkable things was hearing about the tears of joy he cried because it was the first time he'd had a shower in 5 years. And that was remarkable. Now, here's what a case well tried does. It gives him the ability to have a house, to take a shower, to have a vehicle he can drive, to have the accommodations he needs to live as full a life as he possibly can. Understanding the limitations are still there. But his ability going forward and our ability as lawyers to change that trajectory, if the case is done right, it gives us that ability.
And so I guess, was the video a game changer?
It was. Seeing is believing.
And so what advice would you give to other attorneys who were, trying similar cases or trying to settle a case? Would video help in all aspects of the legal system?
Well, if you can get a jury, an adjuster, to see your case as a story, and not just, lawyers are pretty good at telling stories. We use our voice to create pictures, but to actually see it, to back the storytelling elements of what we do as lawyers with the visual backdrop of what reality really is, it has the ability to reach in and pull people out of their shell, out of their comfort zone, and brings out their humanity and tends to make them, can't make everybody, but it tends to make the bigger humans in all of us come out. And that's why video helps, because if you go through a day, what is our strongest sense? Where do we get most of our input? It's right here.
Right.
It's what we see.
Exactly.
And if we match the decision making from the heart with the input from the day, we've got a much better chance of getting the result we want.
And you're the best at that. And so one of my last questions, I mean, in your view, does video presentation improve juror comprehension of like complex medical issues?
Well, it allows it to be simplified. It allows it to be focused. They get to know what are the important kernels in the entirety of the corn crib. And it allows, my background is largely in theater and acting and directing. It allows me to be a bit of a director and say, jury, see it, focus on it. It's important. Pull back out of that scene, see it, focus on it. It's important. And that, having the visual evidence, gives me the ability to do that.
And so one of my last questions is, so what advice would you give other lawyers that are thinking about investing in a day in the life video?
If you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is, because our commitment to the client when we sign them up better be we're going to do everything we can for them. If not, find another profession. And if you're not willing to put the money behind that, even though it hurts and even though it's scary and even though you may end up with a second mortgage on your house to make this case work, if you're not willing to give that kind of commitment to the case, particularly in a case like this, because I like the success of this case, but what drove my co-counsel and myself every day, every night is, what if we don't succeed? What if we fail? Then our client is going to go through every day in his mother's house with her in her 80s, and when she dies, he's going to be helpless. And we did not change that when we had the power to.
Well, thank goodness he had you for an attorney, Jamie. I mean, because again, I've been working with you for over 30 years and you're the best. And congratulations. And thank you for joining us on the show. And you have a wonderful day, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everything you've done for my clients.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. This case illustrates how juries do not just respond to abstract numbers, they respond to reality. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to sharing more episodes on how video can help increase the value of your case. I'm James Jenkins, and have a great day.